Okay, good evening, guys. So, one, two. So, sounds good. So, welcome to our evening event. My name is Ekaterina. I'm from the Swedbank side, and I'm pretty much excited to hear today the presentation. I need to admit that, nevertheless, that we are actually very much looking forward to organize together with Startup Wise guys with their partners and participate in the FinTech Free Accelerator program at the end of October. So I need to admit that basically we do not know and do not have good understanding how startups shall brand to banks, despite I'm working in the bank. So for me, it is as well quite a big value today to listen to the presentation that we will hear today. And let me introduce Dmitry, who is the chief of the program, the FinTech Free from Startup Wise guys, and he will say a few words and introduce our speaker today.
Hello, everyone. So today we're starting our Masterclass series powered by Wise Guys, by ROCKIT and by Swedbank. And it's our way to bring back the community because during the accelerator we bring a lot of great mentors to work with our startups we select and invest into. But usually those mentors are like limited to their advices to those startups, so we do not have chance to show them to the community. And we thought that probably it's a good way that we show those mentors, and so every month we'll have some kind of event like this here in ROCKIT, so you can have a chance to talk to the guys with expertise from startup world, from the FinTech world, from having the experience working with corporates or some IT guys, which are related to FinTech, but not always. So yeah, so this is a short introduction, and today is the day where the main guy on scene will be Remco, who is our mentor, and he was actually a mentor in our FinTech 1 and FinTech 2 batches, and we really enjoyed working with him. So today he also committed to come to FinTech Free and be a mentor at our third accelerator. And before Remco goes on stage and tells you how to brand to banks, which also means how to sell to banks, there is a short commercial part by Wise Guys. So we are now scouting for the FinTech Free Accelerator. And actually whom we're searching for? We're searching for the tech founders from FinTech. And we want them to build the global companies and become entrepreneurs, to build the companies. Not built to venture capital firms, but built for their clients. And Wise Guys is doing this for 7 years already. So the batches, the accelerators will have this autumn are already 16th or 17th. So it means that we will have about 200 companies in our portfolio till the end of the, around 200 companies till the end of this year. Those companies already achieved great results. There are about 30 million euros fundraised after accelerator program. And we have already 3 exits. 2 of them are major for us. We're really happy about this. And one recent exit is by Stepshot, it's a Ukrainian company. But I think that you can expect quite some exits in the coming years because those companies are maturing to the stage where there will be exits. So yes, so the opportunity is still today and tomorrow you can apply. We're waiting for your applications, so we'll wait and proceed with deal structuring. So you can join the accelerator, which starts already in October. And about the deal, so we are aware that in FinTech, let's say in general in FinTech, the way to the market is not so easy. You cannot build your product with maybe 10K or 20K. Some of the startups which we are dealing with have to go for license. You know, and that's requirements for capitals, requirements for like paying to lawyers and a lot of other stuff. So we put it into different tracks, which will join together at some point in the program, which means that we also expect some post-product market teams, and we'll give them a little bit larger deal. So in general, if you have a startup with some traction, so you expect first to have a deal to be structured up to 100K euros, which is already something in order to build and to test with the clients and go to the next stage of VC funding. And in this stage, we're looking on three main pillars, probably team, product, and market. But in this case, the team is the most important element. So we look for the founders with experience in fintech industry, understanding what they want to disrupt. And this is the main criteria. Are they coachable? Are they a solid team? Do they have working experience together? And of course, we have tech mentors and we have fintech mentors helping us to evaluate the opportunity on the market and the product. Yeah, and the main key of success and acceleration is the team, our mentors, our investors. So we've built a strong team who lead this program. So the Cristobal, the CEO of Wise Guys, will be part of the program. He's here today, so after the event, you can grab him and ask some questions. I will be the managing director for the badge, and Andra will help me. And we'll have such great guys as Juan, Patrick, Yone, and Rafael joining as ERs or advisors to help us work for startups from different angles. And it's not all. We have the team in Wise Guys with more than 20 people. And the team is helping us with marketing, with communication, with legal stuff, with partnership with corporates, some other companies, with investors relations. So this is a support you'll get not only during the program, but all the portfolio companies for life become our community. The other mentors which we use, and usually how it's structured, some people ask, so I don't know if it's training or so. It's not training. The acceleration is not about training, it's about the mentorship. Usually it's one-on-one mentorship, and which you get in order to get the advice specifically for your business. And we have different categories of mentors. By the way, we use more than 100 mentors per program, so in 3 months are quite intensive. So the fintech or startup CEOs, there are corporate mentors having the industry expertise. So we have partnership with some of the corporates, and they're helping us to grow the startups. We have visionaries and people just performing the trends in the fintech industry. So there are some of the names which will be present in the program. And of course, what we do is a community. So just imagine 145 companies in our portfolio. So this is a network. Those companies are based in maybe more than 20 different geographies. So this is a contact point of view, it's a support point of view, it's an advice point, and we meet together in Alicante each year to discuss the current situation, to help them fundraise, and to have a parties. So this is the FinTech 2 demo day. So those guys which are here in the picture are becoming friends forever, and they were joining the Wise Guys family. So expect the same to be for FinTech 3. We have more than 20 fintech companies in our portfolio, which already invested. Some of them are really known also in Lithuanian market. I think that you see some names which you already see somewhere. So Estate Guru is a very great real estate company, but you see all the solutions. Some of them mobile, some of them data protection, some of them are like marketplaces. So it's different kind of fintechs, and we probably like to look at it in a broad way. And we're very happy to have those partners we're working with. And those partners actually helping us to stay on the ground and validate whether those ideas we have make sense. So they're sending us mentor, they're providing all the free advices. And this is the big asset for those startups. Probably this slide we use for like foreigners, and this slide is really helps to attract some of the companies. When we do the batches, some of them are happening in Estonia, some of them are happening in Latvia. And we push Lithuanian startups to go outside Lithuania to accelerate, because it makes sense to explore the new markets, have different networks, have the opportunity to meet other people. But in this case, we say to Lithuanians, please stay in Lithuania. This is the right place to be accelerated for fintechs. The program is 15 weeks, and we start with a value proposition, product positioning, and we slightly go into pitching, sales, and end up with investors relations. So actually, you accelerated in all different ways for having the great business development skills and have the ability to build a company. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to cover today. So please apply, still 1 day left. It's a lot of time to fill application and even to build a pitch deck for a startup. And now I give the floor to Remco, who will continue and the main guy on the scene today.
Well, Dimitri, thank you so much for announcing me. And I have to admit, I've been with Startup Wise Guys for a little less than 2 years, but every time that I managed to help out at their programs, it was absolutely a blast. And I want to shout out to Swedbank for making this possible, because I'm the first time here in this space today, and I have to say, this space is pretty fucking cool. Like, I see a lot of spaces, but this one stands out. Atmosphere is absolutely perfect. So, as Dimitri said, I'm Remco, and I'm gonna talk today about how to brand to banks. But before I want to do that, I want to set the stage and tell you a little bit about what's going on in financial services right now, because there's a lot going on. Well, there's also a lot going on with me right now, because I had an 8-hour delay yesterday because of Polish Airlines, which is not the first time it happens. It happened the last time we went to Lithuania as well, and it caused me to miss another 8 hours in this terrific city, because I have to admit, this place feels like a town, but it's incredible to how much it has contributed to FinTech in Europe and even globally. So shout out to Lithuania, you guys are doing a pretty good job. So yeah, a little bit about myself. So I'm a head of alliances for a FinTech that deliberately chooses to work with banks. Let me ask you guys a question. Who of you here is a banker? It seems you're outnumbered. Well, that's actually a good question. Well, who of you here is working in FinTech then? Because I met a couple of you today, so. All right, let me ask you another question. Who of you here has a Revolut account? Well, that's quite a bit. Who of you here has an account with an incumbent bank, traditional bank? Everybody, I assume. Yeah, almost everybody. Okay, let me ask you another question. Tomorrow you're receiving a bonus of 50,000 euros. You need to make a decision. Are you going to drop it on your Revolut account or on your incumbent bank account? Who here would drop it on Revolut? Ooh, risky business. Who here would drop it on the incumbent bank? You see, there's still like quite an opportunity for traditional banks to catch up with the challenger banks. And this is kind of what we're going to talk today about how you as a FinTech could possibly do business with a bank. Now, I've already set the stage. I work for a company that basically allows banks to operate in the same way as a challenger bank. For example, a while ago, I went to Vietnam, yeah? I mean, you guys have probably seen some Vietnam War movies. It's not like that anymore. But there are some confusing things, such as the currency and the ATMs. So when I arrived, I was standing in front of the airport and I was looking at 7 different ATMs. Man, you have to figure out where to get your cash from. But I didn't need to, because I got a push notification on my phone from Revolut saying, Remco, these ATMs charge you and these ATMs don't. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. So I went to the first ATM that offered me the best transaction fee, which was 0. Great work. That means like personalized, hyper-personalized and in real time stuff that's actually meaningful to me. And we're trying to give these capabilities to incumbent banks. So we're more than happy, for example, to open conversations with Swedbank or Nordea or any of these entities. I will skip this part. I already talked about this, the challenger banks, but I'm gonna leave this out as well. I think that what is really important to highlight here is that there are mega trends happening globally right now that are influencing financial services dramatically. This is not only the rise of the challenger banks and how much disruption they're actually causing, but it's also things like PSD2, the open banking movement, but actually, perhaps even more important, it's Generation Z and different consumer trends. We are seeing a dramatic change in the way that millennials like me, yeah, you could call me a millennial, I was born between 1984 and 1991, I'm 1991, so I'm officially a millennial or whatever, yeah. I tend to behave a little bit different than my parents or some baby boomers. I want different things, different products, that sort of stuff. And this is influencing banking massively. And it's also adding towards the success of FinTech. I mean, if you only look at the amount of investments that happened in 2018, that is 55 billion globally. And we're not even there yet, it continues to rise. FinTech is seeing massive adoption and massive investment worldwide, which makes it one of the most fascinating industries right now. And actually, I want to go back to, oh, here's the back button, to why that is. Why is FinTech so successful? This is actually a slide that Revolut one time used, just to give you an perception about how a challenger bank brands itself. Why is FinTech so successful? First of all, there is a bit of a problem with traditional banks. First of all, they're expensive. Why are they charging you for very basic things? I'm a Dutch guy who lives in Budapest. Who here has been in Budapest? Beautiful city, right? Yeah, I know, yes, that's why I'm there and I like to work in FinTech from there. But let's say that I would be using my traditional bank account, which is ABN AMRO from the Netherlands. And I would want to pay my landlord rent. Simple transaction, right? ABN AMRO would charge me almost 15 euros for a transaction to my landlord for Hungarian forints. This is extremely expensive and it's inconvenient. It's the same thing as back in Vietnam. I would not pop up that Revolut card, now I pop up ABN AMRO. You know what's going to happen? They're going to make a lot of money on every transaction that I'm doing. From withdrawing money to paying with my card in any shop. Actually, the problems with traditional banks is actually the reason why FinTech is booming. Because those problems are massive. They're not just in these little things, they're in almost every area. And we have to actually thank a company called TransferWise for giving birth to the whole FinTech wave. TransferWise was one of the first companies who years ago went on the street and started to educate people about hidden fees when it comes to wiring money. And this has led to, actually the other slide, the rise of the challenger bank. Now, how do you define the challenger bank? First of all, they are almost always, with a few exceptions for SME and that sort of thing, mobile only. Always all mobile only, or extremely fast. There's a famous study about the second element of them, about the homepage of HSBC, which is one of the biggest British banks. And it shows you which challenger bank is actually disrupting any of the services that are listed on the main page. Then the third one is that challenger banks usually focus on one product. They make it very good, they make it fast, sometimes completely free and almost 10 times better. Think about, for example, changing currencies on Revolut or sending money with TransferWise. It's much easier than any traditional service. And the third characteristic is they target an originally underserved demographic in society. So that could mean that me as a startup guy, with irregular income and that sort of problems, if I would go to a bank and I want to apply for a mortgage, they're gonna basically kick me out because my profile doesn't fit them. Or let's say you are somebody, perhaps like me, who is working in Hungary and who wants to easily exchange currencies without paying for it, Revolut. Or you're an immigrant and it's very hard because America is blocking you because you're from Iran. You can open an account with Monies, but you can't do that with a traditional bank. So this is what sets them apart from the rest of the players. Now, I like to talk about this slide in specific because it actually gives us 3 numbers that are crucial to whether you are a FinTech or you're a bank and you're designing a product or an experience. These are the 3 numbers you want to take into account. The first stands for 3.8 billion. That stands for the amount of smartphones globally. And to be honest, at this moment, I think this number is already outdated. Now, the second is 30%. 30% stands for the global workforce of millennials. Again, what I highlighted earlier, people with different habits, different needs. They are the ones who usually adopt FinTech sooner than others. They don't really care about, let's say, very fancy work environment. No, they rather have like a ping pong table somewhere and a craft beer bar hidden in the corner for Friday afternoon. This is why banks or even large corporates are struggling with talent, because their work environment is not tailored to the needs of what, say, is a millennial. But the third number I like the best. And I would like to ask you to guess what it might be. Does anybody have an idea what 8.25 stands for? No, it stands for the attention span of humanity globally across all age groups. Yeah? Now, the attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. That means humanity is behind the goldfish now. That has to do with the fact that we are all addicted to our smartphones, and it has screwed with our attention span. It also means that if you design an app or a product or anything that is not fast enough, people will abandon it. Now, Generation Z, which are kids who are now graduating from college or in university, who even ditched Facebook before you did and are using Snapchat and that sort of services, they have an attention span of 5 seconds. 5 seconds. So that means if your app is not fast enough or your offer is not fast enough, they're going to ditch it and they're going for a competitor. Another funny one is a study done by the Boston Consulting Group in Britain. 3% of people under 25 would go to prison in exchange for their smartphone. Now, this is a bit crazy. I would definitely not go to prison for my smartphone, but it comes a little bit more worrying. Third would give up their sex life for a year in return of their smartphone. Some people would stop seeing friends in person or would actually stop going on vacation. What this means is that anything that you design, if it's not mobile first, it's not good. Mobile first is actually no longer a requirement, it's a primordial need. It's on the same as your basic needs in life. Absolutely. Well, that's also true. Anyway, in Europe, challenger banks have acquired, for this reason, above 12 million average, I think it's almost at 13 now, users, but Revolut actually exceeded 7 million users right now, which means that they're almost as big or even bigger than Barclays. That also means that N26 is already bigger than the largest Dutch banks, for example. So you can see that these trends are really, really influencing the FinTech scene. But what is interesting here, and this is actually kind of my whole idea behind this first part of the presentation, it creates an enormous opportunity. Because the banks are realizing that if we don't step up our game, if we don't improve our customer service, if we don't make better experiences, we are going to lose market share towards these guys. And this creates a huge opportunity for you guys working in FinTech to possibly do business with the bank. And believe me, these trends are not stopping, they're ongoing. And things are changing every few months. Now, if you look at the reasons why people won't actually switch to these banks, it's 33% says that they just like to do banking online more convenient. Now, 31% says, I will get better rates. Sometimes when I'm doing an event with banks, or I have them on stage, I ask them like, you're losing so many customers to challenger banks because they offer good effect rates or no effect rates. Why are you not doing this? The obvious answer is, I'm making a lot of money on this. But the second question is, you're losing a lot of customers as well. So why don't you change that? Anyway, just some food for thought. So they, of course, have a benefit just like any FinTech does. First of all, they almost have no operation costs. Have you guys ever seen some of the big headquarters of some of the incumbent banks? Do you know how much money it costs to operate those buildings? It's insane. Do you think about all of the costs that are associated with regulation, with enormous amounts of employees? It costs a lot of money to operate these guys. And as a FinTech, and you're just working from some cool level 39 office in London, you're not making too many costs, right? Plus, you don't have to pay an enormous bonus towards some C-level at the end of the year. That also helps. The second is leveraging technology. Also, as FinTechs, we can easily do anything we want. We can adopt artificial intelligence, or just simply set machine learning, or any new technology. You want to call it blockchain, that's fine with me. The other one is they offer a better user experience. Any company like Uber Uber is only successful because it offers you a super smooth experience. Uber is not necessarily about, let's say, fixing the taxi problem. Uber is about giving you certainty about what happens when you book a cab to get from point A to point B. Consumers nowadays, they don't want products. They want an experience. They want to be taken from point A to point B without too many hassle. And fintechs are increasingly successful in providing such experiences in financial services. And the other thing is, and I think that is a lesson also towards banks, when the ATM first got introduced, years ago, banks saw the ATM as a competitor. But after a while, they gave up on this because they realized if we keep fighting ATMs, we cannot focus on the core of our business. As fintechs and banks, we need to realize that we need to focus on what we're good at. A bank is good at providing banking services. And other services that they might not be able to provide or they don't have the capacity to do themselves, they should work with fintechs to make that ecosystem better. Challenger banks are extremely successful as this. They just say, okay, lending is not my game, so let's partner up with somebody else. Savings is not my game. I'm not good at it. Let's work with somebody else to make that happen. And I think this is actually what characterizes the whole fintech bank relationships. This is where we need to head to. And I think if you look, for example, at Swedbank's cooperation with Maniga, which is a really successful fintech, and if you guys want to have, I will talk about it later, that's a good example of successful collaboration between a fintech and a bank. But there are many hassles to get to that point. Now, if you look at some other trends, especially in the US, Amazon. You know, everybody always speaks about Amazon. Because you know what Amazon does really well is they are able to leverage your data. Amazon is almost able to predict your next purchase. So that means that based on your behavior, Amazon can basically predict the next buy you're going to make. And not only that, it's going to recommend it before you want it. Very efficient. This has led people to believe that Amazon is some sort of hub. So that also means that 37% of people who do not even use Amazon to buy stuff would take up a bank account from Amazon if it would offer so. And if you look at, for example, the recent introduction of the Apple Card, which I guess you guys have all heard about, although I am very doubtful about its success in Europe, because Europe works a little bit different than the US, it's still a very interesting trend that, again, influences the banks. Because if big tech enters banking, even we as fintech might have a problem. Think about that for a second. So what is the real challenge? It's actually quite a big challenge. So now we're going to talk about why and how and the best lessons in how to brand as a fintech towards bank. Because if we want to survive in this ecosystem together, we will need to partner up. And I would like to ask your participation if you have any question or any input, specifically from your experience working with banks or even from a banking point of view. I'm really glad to hear it. Can any of you guess this overview of fintechs? Is this European or does it belong to one single country? What do you think? You can raise your hand for one single country. Who thinks it's European? Actually, it's Dutch. I'm not kidding. This is the Dutch ecosystem. It's an enormous amount of companies. Now, not all of them are, of course, based in the Netherlands. They're part of a fintech hub. But it gives you an idea about how many fintechs are in this space. In Europe alone, there are 6,000 registered, relatively big fintechs. 6,000. Now, challenger banks, they're probably like a little over, I think at this point, probably over 80. Then there are also lots of banks. And it's like a complete jungle. Fintechs are competing with fintechs, challenger banks are competing with challenger banks are competing with banks. It's a mess. So that brings me to the first point about how to brand for banks. You need to have a very strong differentiation on your value proposition. In Startup Wise, guys, I come along a lot of startups like early stage, ranging from ID stage to early stage or to even more advanced, that come up with a solution. And then my first question always is like, well, how do you stand out? Like, what is your core USP? What makes you special? Because if you go back to the jungle, you really need to be special. You need to have something that stands out. I mean, we've all heard about the onboarding companies, KYC, crypto, blockchain, everything. And my first question is always, so what? What are you doing? Is your product really great? What makes it stand out? What is so great about it? I think that's probably one of the first things that you need to have clear. A crystal clear value proposition. What are you solving? There is a company that I will show you later called Tink. And Tink is a really successful Swedish account aggregator. So what they do is they allow a bank to tap into other banks' data so you can get an overview of all your financial spending. So that means if you are banking with Swedbank, but you also have an account with SAB, you can get that together and you can get some intelligent notifications about it. Very clear value proposition. Now you also have companies like Maniga or some other ones. I will show you later, but they have very strong value propositions. And this is something that you need to nail. Now going back to the other point, making sure that you're actually solving the bank's problem. You don't know the bank's problem. You have to figure that out. There are currently, when we go back to all of these trends, we can clearly see that there are some areas where you might really be able to solve the bank's problem. If we're talking about these customer experience problems, for example. We're talking about personalization in banking. And all sorts of these things. Security, fraud, all these areas. But what are you really trying to solve? Before going on the market, I always say to fintechs, go speak to banks. Just try to chat to them. See what's going on. And we're not even talking about the culture problems. We will get to that later. But first you need to figure out the business problem. Because if you can't solve that, you can't solve anything. Fortunately, there is a lot of public information available about banks. You can look up almost everything. Who's doing what is the current state, what kind of issues are they facing, what is the head of digital trying to do, what is the digital transformation about, why is this not working, why are there some issues. It's very easy to figure out all of this information. Now the second is, and that is a very important one, I would say, and very obvious, establish credibility. If you don't have credibility, you have basically nothing. So if you're a really good company, FinTech from Lithuania, and you have a really great product that really solves a big pain point, but you don't have any established credibility, it's very difficult to move. For example, my own company, well, it's not my company, but let's say W.UP. We work together with Raiffeisen Bank International, some of these bigger players. But the funny part is, when we go to a Dutch bank, like ABN AMRO, they don't want to listen to us because we don't have credibility in Western Europe. So it doesn't matter if you're working with one of the largest banks from Austria. Wow, who cares? If you haven't worked with the Dutch entity for some reason, you are not credible. So that means that one of the strategic advices I sometimes give to companies or fintechs is if you can do a pilot with a hip bank or hip fintech, like a partnership, even if it's a strategic sale, so you're not making any profit on it, you're just doing it to get the name in your pitch deck, it's worth it. Even if it was just a proof of concept. Doesn't matter. If you can do business with a credible company that is acknowledged, your business case will be much easier. Much, much easier. Now the third one is to demonstrate that you're serious. For example, I can tell you a little bit about the sales cycle that happens when I am dealing with banks. So that usually goes like this. 1.5 years ago, I am in Copenhagen. I don't like Copenhagen, but whatever, that's my personal opinion. I was at a FinTech conference where you're supposed to establish thought leadership. Yeah. We paid 11,000 to have me on stage. Well, believe me, that's a lot of money for 20 minutes. I was talking about topics not so similar to these, but a little bit, so that people at least have the intention and heard something different than another sales pitch again, because we're all really bored of that at this point. So I managed to get into a conversation with the chief digital officer of Nordea. Well, that's great. That's the sort of guy that I'm after, right? So me trying to hunt banks, head of digital, chief CRM, all of these guys, if I get just 5 minutes with them, and they like what I said, and I can get their business cards so I can chase them up, I have won. Then I have scored officially a lead, which is, terrific. It took another month, 3 months, for him to finally reply to my email. Then it took another 2 months to get an actual meeting. Then it turned out that although we spoke to digital and retail, CRM had some concerns about our solution, so that means you have to go back to Copenhagen to explain the same story again, but to a different department. Now, another couple of weeks later, you get to deal with procurement. Oh, we love procurement. No, we don't. Procurement, no idea about what we do. So you spoke to all of the levels in the bank, still not there. This level of intensity that you're dealing, or that you're putting into trying to deal with the bank, is showing that you're serious. Showing that you're willing to go there, again, to convince another stakeholder. Because in the banks, there's a hierarchy, and sometimes the decision is not with the guy that you put so much effort into, that organized a meeting for you with another few stakeholders. It takes a lot of energy. Now, another one that I highly recommend is partnerships. If you are a fintech with a certain product, which you can find an industry expert, or even another fintech who's complementary to your product, partner up with them. For example, we as W.UP, it's a company that was founded 4 years ago after an exit by the founders through Finestra, which is now one of the largest financial services companies worldwide. We are still what I call the Eastern European bubble. The Eastern European bubble kind of sucks to be in. Because every time that we go anywhere, and you say that, where's your headquarters? Yeah, it's in Budapest. Oh, Budapest, is that in Hungary? Yeah, it is, yeah. Although we deliver really great content about, impact of personalization in banking, digital sales, AI's impact on financial services, that all doesn't matter. You need a few partners that add to that validation thing. Just as what I told you earlier, if you can do business with a well-known bank, even if it's nothing, do it and partner up with as many companies or good, credible companies that you can partner up with. We just partnered with a company called Backbase, which is the Dutch leading digital banking provider, and that helped a lot. Also, partnering up with entities such as Copenhagen FinTech or Holland FinTech or some of these FinTech hubs that we see all over Europe is greatly beneficial because people will perceive you differently than what you are. You can always cheat it and hire an office at level 39 in London, just one desk, with a post address. So you can put on your website that your office is actually in London in Canary Wharf. That's a way to dodge it, but it's a bit tricky. I wouldn't recommend it. Yes, and then positioning. So WU here is working on a fintech product at this moment that could be sold to banks. I know yours. What are you working on, if I may ask? Uh-huh. Seriously. Okay. And what exactly does it do? At this point, we concentrate on money management, personal management for women, and then we will move on to other services that are provided from, or not provided from the banks or financial institutions. Okay, so it's like a PFM in a sense. Okay, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So one of the first things that I always say is that when it comes to your product, when you pitch it, I will give an example later about our own product because we are currently going through rebranding because we call ourselves right now AI-powered banking experience. And my first question to any guy for my company would say that is, what is that? AI-powered banking experience? Well, that could be a lot, right? So the first thing is be crystal clear about what you do, what you can provide. This helps a lot in your position towards banks. Second is, very obviously, don't have the same pitch to all clients. Obviously, you're going to talk to different financial institutions who you might know something about. My big tip here, personalize everything. From your slide deck to what you're going to say, make sure that you're up to speed with the latest news about this bank or any financial institution. Personalize everything. In some cases, it depends on the product, of course, because in your PFM example, it might be like a standalone app, perhaps, that is not completely integrated to a bank, but to a bank, personalize it. Everything. You need to do it. The third one is, don't overpromise on your product. Your product is not able to solve everything. So if you position it as, let's say, the ultimate financial crime solution, it probably isn't. It probably is good at one thing or two things. And by the way, a banker, if you say that your product will solve all of their things, will think, sure. No, it doesn't. It can fix a few things, but not everything. Of course, it depends on who you are. But even if you look at some of the biggest fintechs in Europe, like Tink or Backbase, they can't solve everything. They provide you something, they're good at it, and they keep their focus on it. Because otherwise, they lose their credibility. The fourth is, of course, don't say that your product is the best. We all know that there are competitors. In each of my meetings with banks, they always come up, or if you're even in a process, let's say, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the term RFI or RFP. Does it make any sense? Okay. So if you do business with the bank and they finally decide to do something with you, you usually go through what is called an RFI. And an RFI is a very detailed document in which they might ask a lot of questions related to their need, but always they will ask you, how do you compare to competitors? Make crystal clear what are your unique abilities, what are your USPs, what can you provide, and what can you not provide. Because there will be a point where you cannot provide. For example, we went through a very lengthy process trying to deal with ABN AMRO, for which I will show you guys a few slides because we lost the opportunity. And you can see the slides that we created, how we approached this, but how we ultimately, and I think there are a few factors here that, it's a complex question, why we lost it. For example, they asked us if we can provide chatbot capabilities. We can't. So we went into a bit of a direction to bring a chatbot provider in as a third party. It's not a really good move. If you can see that there is a clear need for this, you can do it, be honest about it. Yes, selling to banks. This is also something that Dimitri highlighted earlier to me. To give you a bit of an idea about transparency about who you are and what your stage is. So within Startup Wise Guys, as I mentioned earlier, we come across everything, from companies that are running, to very early ideas. If you're doing business with the bank, you need to be very, very transparent about the stage of your product. You can go on stage with a PPT at a conference, and you can get interest from people, but if there's no real product behind it, people will find out eventually. The second tip for me is if you want to sell to banks, but you're really small, like small team, with no traction, with no references, and even if your product is good, it's not going to bill. So size matters. Also, the readability of your product matters, to what stage it is. Of course, if you become more popular and you get more clients, a good example, again, Backbase, look them up if you're interested, because they're a really good example on how to do this. They have an on-conference each year, and they really provide like an Apple-like experience to their banking customers about the stage of the product. But because they have so many clients already, they can really showcase you something that really isn't there at all, but you will buy into it, and it might be there in the next 3 years. But if you don't have the size of Backbase, then you can't do this. So if you're very early stage, be crystal clear about what you're going to deliver. The second is, be prepared for legal questions, and data questions specifically. Every bank, in almost every solution that's out there right now is dealing with GDPR. I mean, we've all heard about GDPR, especially my mailbox has heard about it, by the way, and a few of these other examples. So be prepared to answer any legal question, bring someone in. Always in any meeting you might be able to get with any prominent institution, bring the best of your team. It's worth investing. Bring someone from technical, bring someone from data. Because banks are always going to ask you these questions. And if it's only a business development guy or a sales guy, it's not going to budge. I would say that I'm a business development guy. But in some discussions, I cannot hold my man. When it goes really technical, or even in the first meeting, if even it's 2 hours or something, and they go into very serious related questions to data questions, I need backup. So always be prepared for this if you want to deal with banks. The third one is obviously obvious, but I heard that in Lithuania, everything related to compliance and regulation is a bit easier. That's why we have so many good fintechs coming from here, but also be prepared for compliance and regulation everywhere you go. And everywhere you go means that it's different almost everywhere. Because, for example, dealing with Nordea from Scandinavia was quite, it took some time, but it was easy. But then you go to Austria, where they're a little bit more heavy on regulation. And let's not talk about the German market, by the way. If I would advise you guys, just ignore it. Don't go there. It's horrible. They are much more heavy on any of these questions, and all of these rules and laws, they differ from country to country. So always do your homework. That's basically my last part. Investigate. Who are you dealing with? Who are the right stakeholders? What's happening to the bank? What is their agenda? You can find all of these things out. What kind of laws are applicable here? What kind of trends are currently playing? Today I heard from one of the people that we interviewed that there was an initiative by the Minister of Finance from Lithuania for 2020 to regulate something that, to be honest, I didn't hear about before. But these are sort of things that you need to know. And if I would have known before and I would go to a bank in Lithuania, let's say SAB Bank, it would be better to know these things. Now, to give you a few examples, I mean, we all know some of these companies. Revolut, obviously. The other three might be a little, I mentioned them before in my presentation. If you guys want to do a good lesson for yourself, like your branding or something, you're looking at how to position yourself, good language, good website layout, good communication, that obviously worked with banks because all of those three companies are working with very big, major global banks. Check those guys out because they have amazing branding. To give you a bit of an example, I just show you this slide from a sales deck from a company called Maniga. Who of you here understands this product? Like, what do you think it is? Do you know? I know. Yes, because you're working with them, yeah. It's wealth management or just finance management? Categorization and that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's what it is. So it just shows you very clearly what you're spending, and then the message from Maniga to get in a client is build meaningful engagement. Well, you know, you can put all sorts of terms behind this. What is meaningful engagement? But again, it seems to work because they're highly successful. And with these sort of very clear widgets, which you need to include in your presentation, always visualize everything, because it makes it more easy for anybody to understand, especially in a bank. Because the first people that you will talk to are people from digital or business units or whatever. They need to have a visualization of anything you do. Always have widgets. Now, this is it came out a bit weird on the screen, but if you want to find out a very good brand style, that has just the right colors, right fonts, right looks, right everything, check out Think. And if they are absolutely forerunners here. They are doing exceptionally well. If you go to any conference, this is the first booth that you will pick out because of the colors, the way it's designed. You will know it's them. Yeah, they will give you an iPhone case with their logo on it, which also helps, by the way. And yeah, that's just the tip of me. Now, I want to go back to a little bit about what I told earlier about ABN AMRO and how to do business with the bank and how we try to personalize everything. To give you a bit of an example about the widgets I was just talking about. So we came in with, for example, this slide. So we put in ABN AMRO, we made a widget that actually looks like their mobile banking app. Because we don't provide UX, we work on top of their UX. But what we do is we monetize data in real time to detect live events, where the bank might want to intervene with you exactly when, where, and when you want it. So that could, for example, mean that we detect that somebody just had a newborn, and based on that you want, as a bank, instead of pushing products, you want to offer personalized advice. Because then, as a bank, you can build higher engagement. Because right now, what is kind of the mantra in financial services is that banks need to stop pushing products, but need to start offering experiences. And need to be there at certain live events when you might want them to. So that could be that, for example, the Vietnam example. That was great. I needed advice right there. But it could also mean that, let's say you're me and you're 28 and for some reason you receive a bonus, which doesn't happen in FinTech, by the way. You might want to invest that, but I have no clue into what. It would actually be nice if somebody reaches out to me saying, hey Remco, we detected that you just received a bonus salary. Let's look at some investment opportunities that are tailored to your needs. Because if you really monetize my data, you could figure out that I'm a guy who spends a lot of money in restaurants and bars and on running shoes because I like to do that. And you could even send me, based on my location, through a merchant, a discount on running shoes when I'm close to a running shoe store. Would any of you want that? That's a good question, actually, I would like to ask to you. Would you like the bank to be there when certain things in your life might happen, when you want the bank to give you advice on this? Who of you would like that? Yeah. Yes, it's of course about being exactly there when it's correct, right tone, right time, which is a very tricky game. Yes.
Yeah, it's just an example from what we're doing and how we understand that. Most millennials, you are a millennial, as you said. I'm too old to be millennial by that time. Most millennials say that they would rather go to the doctor, to the dentist, than go to the bank for advice. So once bank starts advising you unasked, I think it would have negative effect on the relationship of you and the bank, because they will be trying to teach you money each and every step. Now they send you messages that you overspend on shoes, overspend on something, overspend on that and that and that. If they will try to teach you how to buy stuff, that would be tragic.
Yes, but it's really about the message, right? So if they're trying to teach you how to buy stuff, I think we're going in the wrong direction. But let's say if I detect that your salary changes because you changed the job, and I would recommend you a better account that actually fits this new salary, you might want to take it because it's actually personalized advice in this case. Or, it's a tricky question because, for example, we did a use case with, so let's say I detect that you're at an airport. So normally if you go to a KFC, which I never go to, but some people do, and you would buy something there, it would tag it as a fast food transaction, right? So in your overview on your bank account, it said, well, you spent this amount on fast food this month. But if I detect this transaction in an airport, our system sends a real-time trigger to the bank CRM saying, well, Remco is at the airport. Because that fast food transaction contains a code that I can know that I'm at the airport. Then the bank can see Remco has not set his card limits to worldwide. So that means if I go to Vietnam and I want to take money, I can do it because I haven't put this thing on. So if they send me a message saying, Remco, you're about to travel probably, these limits or these card settings are not right, you might want to change that. Well, that's nice advice, thank you. So it really depends on how you do it. For example, with PFM, the question was always, if you want to help people with their spending behavior, you send them just an overview of like, this is what you spent this week on going out or on groceries. It's not really relevant. And sometimes people don't even want to know this information. But if you make it proactive and contextual, so that you can actually help people like build healthy financial habits, it's already a different game. But it also really depends on the segment. I mean, if I tell my father, like, Dad, and he's 64, like, would you like to get real-time notifications on your spending? He's like, no, absolutely not. But if you tell me, 28-year-old guy who's Dutch, and we are fascinated by money control, then yeah, I mean, we're even famous for saying going Dutch, right? That means that we split the bill all the time. We're terrible, but it really depends on the demography.
But don't you think that? I'll pass the mic. Don't you think that there is a fine line, and like really fine line between serving and selling today?
Yes.
And that most cases the bank thinks of you when they want to sell their product. If your wife is pregnant, they will try to sell you insurance. And that is like 100% not serving you. That is 100% selling, and that's differentiate that at the very beginning. It's like really important. Bank don't do that. FinTechs should somehow.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a very fine line, actually.
Yeah, just one comment on this shopping advisory, like from the bank. Just the example from our real daily life and in Swedbank, what problem we're trying to solve. That there was an idea to help people to save money, but just not by reducing your spending, because you probably need some stuff to buy anyway. So the idea was to track if you, let's say, buy the sneakers each season in one particular shop and you like that kind of brand or that kind of shopper, so be able to advise on the discount when it is for your beloved product or in your beloved brand or shop. So
I think that's actually a really good example, to be honest. That is something that we try to build some use cases on, but this is actually useful.
So this is more like for connecting this like economic agents, the merchants and the buyers, and how to say, making them happy.
Yeah.
One wants to sell, another wants to buy. So this is like the remark on your question. Would I like to get the notification when I'm like passing the sneakers store? Would I like to get notification buy the sneakers? So I would appreciate if this is like my beloved store, and that currently it's like the best deal for me to buy this.
Yeah,
so that kind of advice.
But this is actually what you're talking about, is exactly the thing that you constantly hear in financial services, that banks need to be hyper-personal and contextual and relevant really at the situation where they only might be. So I would actually like to get that notification. As a frequent runner, believe me, I run about 4,000 a year. I have to buy stupid shoes every 6 weeks, and believe me, they're really expensive sometimes. So if I know exactly when there's a sales going on, I get the notification. Even if it's from my bank, I would kind of be like, hey, that's actually quite nice. I would probably take up that offer. But it's really about not pushing products. Like to your example, if you want to offer insurance to somebody who's like pregnant, that's like pushing a product. To give an example, like ABN AMRO came up with a concept. So they called it Friendlier Future. Yeah? A Friendlier Future was all about that they want to help their clients build financially healthy habits. So it means that, let's say, you want to advise a person who wants to buy a house or wants to go on a world trip, how to get to that certain amount of cash and what he needs to save along the way. But what ABN AMRO was really saying behind the back is, we want to sell more loans and more savings products. The entire presentation was about, we want to become the bank of the future. But when we spoke to retail, it was actually about just selling more loans and savings products. So it is a very fine line, and we need to see where this goes. But for example, if you as a bank can really give useful advice to clients, if you just advice, no products, you can build higher engagement. All of you here in the room, if you're using apps and services that you like because they're contextual to you, who here like Spotify? I love Spotify, especially those weekly recommendations, because it feels personalized and tailored to my needs. Plus, Spotify is not actually pushing any product on me. I have a subscription already, so whatever. To give you another example, we tried to use case with helping people, or just giving them an overview, like just a widget, with their recurring subscriptions. Yeah, all of us are using like a lot of subscriptions nowadays. It's like iCloud, it's Spotify, it's Netflix, it's all of these things. And if you show an overview to people from these subscriptions, they will start to think about it. Do I really use these subscriptions? We have a use case where a bank actually managed to capture all of the money that they were able to save from their clients from just showing them these subscriptions and saying, you want this? Do you really need this? And people are like, perhaps not. And if you can capture that amount of money that you manage to save for people, that's quite a lot. And it was not pushing a product at all.
For this use case, we as well have one more successful example of cooperation. Probably you heard about Mina Technologies. So the subscription management tool was as well one of that we have branded together.
Oh, yeah.
So that as well has quite a big success. So for I would even mention for both, for the Mina and for Swedbank. And there was like one as well more interesting moment that they had an opportunity when the solution was up and running. They had an opportunity to onboard the customers in their own channel and as well inside the Swedbank channel. So the conversion rate, of course, was maybe 4 times higher or even more. So that kind of cooperation as well is quite interesting, probably for both sides.
Successful cooperation, right? And this is actually what I want to I won't show you all of these things, but to go back to again, to go back to what we previously spoke about, this is the sort of thing you want to do. So you want to show widgets that are actually tailored to the bank. So here you can see that we clearly have ABN AMRO here. You can see exactly what we want to do. This is a simple notification that your remaining limit is low. Just notifying people about their spending, sending them a notification saying, hey, based on your predicted income or whatever, you're gonna run out of money. I will skip this one. This, for example, is a use case that we did that, when I go back to the airport example, if you detect, as a bank, if you know exactly what kind of products your user has, then you can know if a person doesn't have a travel insurance. So if you see that somebody's traveling, let's say, to the United States, you can offer that person a protection. And we can do that based on data, and the only data I need for that is an airport transaction or hotel booking, or flight ticket booking. And it's very easy to get this data. Then the second is just giving a person a welcome message when the person arrives to a country. Saying like, this is the current exchange rate. These ATMs you can use without charge. And then at the end, when the person comes back upon automatic detection in the country, you turn off the travel insurance for this person, don't have to ask him, and send him an overview of expenses. This one is a bit more complicated. This was specifically tailored to the Dutch market, I would say. This is detecting an outlier transaction, like let's say a bonus or whatever. You offer that person a loan, you try to monitor the entire process, and then detecting expiry of the loan offer, you offer long-term savings plans. And this is just an example of, let's say, a customer journey. It might not be explicable for all customers, but this is just an example of how do you tailor to a bank, because we knew that ABN AMRO was interested in this. So this is how you go to a bank with these sort of use cases. So this is basically, I think I will sum it up shortly. I have one last thing, because I like this slide. It's not only about what the bank wants, okay? It's also about what you as a fintech wants. I think one of the biggest pain points that I see companies go down because of this, and I'm not even talking about W.UP, because believe me, we lose a lot of money on this problem, is actually what kind of bank can you work with? You have to evaluate a bank. Not all of them are cooperative. Some of them are aware that all of these trends we talked about earlier are actually taking place. Some of them are aware but are ignoring it. Some have a toxic culture where there's a dinosaur sitting at the C-level suit who's not willing to change. Yeah? And you can keep pushing these banks, you can keep visiting them, you can put endless amount of resources into it, but it's not going to work. And it's going to cost you a lot of money, and probably money that you don't have. Unless you're very lucky and you're already in a scale-up stage, you can afford to smash tons of sales and marketing efforts into trying to cooperate with these banks. And I came up with 3 things. Also, a CEO of a bank recently told me, Remco, it's sometimes even so that we really want to work with you guys, but we just can't. And we can't admit it, although we all know that we want to work with you, but for some reason it just doesn't work. And there are 3 tips that I can give you trying to work with any big financial institution. Where it is a bank, where it's a lender, insurance, they all have these elements. The first thing that you want to do is analyze whether they have an accelerator or a VC. This is a really important part of trying to evaluate the bank's opportunity to work with them, or their capability to work with you. If they have an accelerator or VC, that's already a sign that they're interested in working with fintechs. This is a big plus. The other one is, does it have known fintech partnerships? Well, to go back to the Swedbank example again, the Maniga one, Mina one, those are examples, and it shows that the bank is willing to experiment and is willing to work with fintechs. To give you a funny example, a pretty successful challenger bank from 2012, like a digital bank, but we don't really hear from them anymore. They were evaluated very highly. I think in 2015 it was called Fidor. Was acquired in 2016 by BCPE, which is like big French bank. It was part of 2 old mergers from very old French banks, and they acquired Fidor, And CEO said, well, this is really like, a really good example to show how the bank is willing to go to digital transformation working with fintechs. Not so long later, BCPE announced that they would break from Fedor because of cultural clash. Yeah, it's a completely different game. Like fintech and banks, culture is completely different. It depends on who you're working with. I mean, even if I go to an event, it's easy to pick the fintech guy because he's wearing the weird socks. Yeah, the bank is just wearing the gray suit as always. And this actually portrays how they work together. But it's difficult to get them to like each other. So it is the second part is, does it have non-fintech partnerships? If they don't, you should probably not shoot for it. So, for example, Nordea has a lot of these examples. Barclays in the UK, Lloyds Bank, even Goldman Sachs working with Apple. I'm not sure if that's a good example here. The third one is also crucial, is there an innovation lab? Is there a unit within the bank that tries to push innovation? Now, most of the times, these guys are the eager ones, including the VC. They're very happy to talk to fintechs. But they don't have the decision-making power, so don't get all too excited when you made a good impression on them. For example, W.UP as a company is not looking for investment. We are stable, we have good revenue streams, we don't want any foreign investor. But sometimes I go to events and I'm specifically looking for the VC guys, because they are looking for fintechs to possibly invest into as a bank. And for early stage and mid stage startups, I would highly recommend any of you to look into accelerator programs from banks. Why? They provide the banking infrastructure, their ticket sizes are usually quite high, and their equity is usually quite low. But for a strategic sales guy like me, talking with the VC and trying to somehow convince them that W.UP is looking for investment, which we not really are, then at one stage they will introduce us to the right stakeholders in the bank, and that was probably quite a couple of months of time saved. So try to find any of these guys. If you find them, talk to them, because those are your ways in from a strategic point of view. Now, this is sort of like my last lame slide, because this really sort of characterizes the bank and fintech relationship. The left obviously being the bank, it has some benefits, it's 40 feet high, it has a much more mass, much more capital, and much more other things, while the human is quite a bit slower, but he's much more agile, he's much more able to adapt to change, and if a few comets rain down on this planet, which might happen because of climate change, we might be able to adapt and that guy won't. But if they work together, they might be able to save everybody. So that's my last message to you. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Well, not per se from a fintech bank relationship, but I think a very good example is US bank Goldman Sachs. There's a really famous photo about their like stock traders. Like back in 2005, you see like this room full of people, like traders. And now, like 10 years or 11 years later, the room is empty, and there are like 10 data scientists sitting somewhere, having taken over everything those traders were doing. And that bank is able to somehow move faster and more agile than even some fintechs are. In Europe, it's a bit hard to say. I haven't really seen any bank at a large level being able to move faster and as agile as a fintech. I haven't seen them yet. The interesting question is, how will Revolut actually, constantly growing? The company has now 800 plus employees. Sooner or later, it's going to be as big as a bank. The question is, as you grow, you lose agility. So even a Revolut might at one point be a dinosaur. It could happen. The more complex they become, it will be harder. And I even heard today in a discussion from somebody who said, well, that's all nice, Revolut, but to be honest, Swedbank almost offers the same thing in terms of functionality on the mobile app. So I think that there is an opportunity for the incumbents to catch up, because they still have the trust level, they have usually a larger customer base who's quite loyal to them. People tend to trust traditional banks. That's just the same as when I said earlier to you, you get it 50,000, where you're going to drop it, yeah? Revolut or Swedbank? Well, everybody's going for Swedbank here. It's because money is trust. So I don't see any incumbent being at the same level. Not yet, but they could definitely catch up.
So you mentioned Revolut, so and also mentioned that everyone is putting the money into fintech, but these fintechs are not making profit yet. And although they are growing, like Revolut is nearly the same size as smaller bank, they're not profitable. So is it not a bubble?
Well, it's definitely a problem, but in a
Bubble,
sense,
not a problem, bubble.
oh, a bubble, yeah. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. So I once heard a keynote that somebody asked the same question, like, okay, so you have a lot of users, but you're not making any money. And then that person said, well, this is simply just like business innovation. We're not focused at making money. We're focused at gaining more users and offering them an experience which at one point will turn them from a free user to a paid user, just because of the user experience. So the game that Revolut, N26, and Monzo are all playing is just acquiring as many users as possible. All of their marketing and sales efforts go into that direction, while banks are focused at retention, retaining the clients that they have. Challenger banks don't care about profit. They care about users. And that's actually kind of the same as for a Netflix or Spotify. It's getting more and more users. That is their business plan. And at one point, these users will convert. And as, for example, Revolut grows, instead of just giving you an account you can nicely spend with a flashy looking card, at one point you can probably get a loan from Revolut. So as they grow, their business model starts to get more complex. And we have to see where it goes, because even for, let's say, Monzo or N26, they have so many foreign investors. And those investors only want one thing. They want money. They want that these entities at one point start making money. So we have to see this. This is going to be very interesting to observe where this space is going.
Can you maybe share your thoughts? How do you foresee the future trends in fintech community or in fintech market regarding their solutions? Probably it's it's not a secret anymore that the APIs will be open in traditional banks. So maybe you foresee some kind of trends how fintechs are going to use this opportunity to connect.
Well, that's interesting. That's kind of like what I said earlier about all of these fintechs being on the European market with all of their solutions and all of their different things, and they're all competing with each other as well. So as I see the fintech space, it's very simple, to be honest. But that's my opinion. Of course, you can challenge that. I think it's cooperate or die. Like if you look at all of the trends that are currently happening. And if everybody's fighting everybody with different solutions, this is not going to work. And sooner or later, the winners will differentiate themselves from the losers. And I think that one of the biggest trends is if, for example, like data is the new gold, right? So I think for any institution, if even not fintech, how you're able to use data effectively will determine whether you are part of the winners or the losers. And if you're able to focus and make your core value proposition or product extremely efficient, and whatever you can do, you partner up with others who can't, that will determine, I think, who will keep standing and who won't keep standing. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that traditional banks will die and blah, blah, blah. I haven't seen it happen, to be honest, yet, so it's very interesting to watch this space. What will happen to the challengers, what will happen to the traditional banks. I think it all depends on partnership, use of data, ability to adapt to change, ability to adapt to, for example, those consumer trends that I was highlighting, because that's a major thing. And if you look at, and we haven't even covered that in this presentation, but if you look to the Far East, it's very interesting what's happening there. And those guys might even be further ahead than we are. We're talking about like Widget or Alibaba or some of these Asian players, yeah, that have managed to put everything from a person's life into one app. From literally everything. paying people, ordering stuff, getting taxis, getting everything, all in one app. And they're probably even further ahead than we are. We are just still busy with the challenger banks and the nice effect rates and stuff. So it's interesting to see what will happen. US market is behind, although Brazil is booming now. And there's also an enormous opportunity now in Africa. Also just very recently. So I'm just watching it for now.
Remco, so a few comments from me. So you started with the not very encouraging Copenhagen story about 1.5 years, like trying to get from the initial contact and conference to the deal with some fintech. So 3 weeks ago, I went to Tel Aviv, also for a scouting trip, and we had really great event, and there was some corporates, some insurtech, some traditional banks, and some more niche banks discussing about the integrations. So they were discussing about B2B products. Usually, some startups come to them, and how much time does it take to have this integration? So they all agreed. So in average, it's about 4 months. So they have the process established. So the deal from the initial meeting till the some deal can happen in 4 months. Of course, then comes in the integration. So it's much less than 1 year or whatever. So, but can you share some stories you experienced or heard that you meet the bank and the deal happens in 1 month? You have the contract.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting, but it's a complex question because it really depends on the product, right? So you can have a deal in 4 months, yeah, of course, because that really depends on what are you offering. I mean, if it's a simple solution, let's say a part of an already existing process like verification or something, or a KYC solution or something like that, yeah, that can happen really quickly. But when you think about our solution, which basically I haven't covered it, but our pitch towards the banks is we need all your data. We need your financial data, we need your product data, we need real-time data, we need data from the mobile app, we need data from everywhere. And we all need to get that out of silos, we need to get that into a certain format. We need to build a layer on top of your existing data system. It's complex. And of course it's going to take time, and this is why our discussions are at least 1 year, 1.5. So it depends on the complexity. Although one time, with a Dutch entity, we went there and they just said, well, let's build a POC, and 6 weeks later it was done. And that rarely happens. After one meeting, no, let's do a POC. That's the integration, basically. That's the only example that it's not standout, but yes, it can happen. But it really depends on where you go, what's the maturity of the ecosystem, blah, blah, blah. In Eastern Europe, the maturity is low, but I wouldn't say the Baltics are not Eastern Europe. For example, Austria, Central Europe, you cannot get a deal like this. It's just because the infrastructure, everything is old. Whereas in Scandinavia, it could happen like that. Yeah. It depends on the product. Okay. Right, then I think.
So then probably we can finish. Thank you, Remco, once again for this nice presentation. So yeah, so please follow us and ROCKIT on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter, whatever you are. So there will be some more masterclasses by wise guys in ROCKIT. And now there are some beers, some soft drinks, and tinginis left. So you can grab something you like and have a chat personally with Remco, me, or Cristobal.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.